Hello there, good afternoon to you if you're just joining me here at LBC. The very first thing to say about the events in and around the Stade de France at the weekend are that, of course, we don't know exactly what happened at every point around that stadium, at every gate around that stadium. But I can tell you with a great deal of certainty that it isn't precisely what the French authorities, both political and policing, are describing. And I've been struck over the weekend. I've been sick to my stomach over the weekend, actually, whenever I focus on this story. And I can only imagine how much more sick to their stomachs and to their hearts the real victims of Hillsborough have been, because you cannot look at these events and the words coming out of the mouths of the authorities in France all these years on and not hear heavy, heavy echoes of Hillsborough. My goodness, it is quite something. It's under the French authorities to some degree. I'm not pretending I know everything by any stretch of the imagination, but the French authorities have taken some lessons from the South Yorkshire Police playbook, that's for sure. I began just before the news when James handed over to me, reading just a little segment. I'm going to do it again in case you missed the earlier bit. It was a big game, a spring day. Fans, men, women, children travelling long distances to support their team. A big police presence. Fans urged to arrive on time. The vast majority do. Warnings from fans hours before kick-off that the policing of the crowd, even as far back as motorways, not just at the actual stadium, wasn't effective. That warnings that was storing up trouble and danger, and it did. Those words, I wrote those words in 2016. I wrote them in 2016 for this programme on the day the Hillsborough jury verdicts in Warrington returned their verdict. The Hillsborough jury returned their verdicts. So 2016 is when I wrote that. And you and I both know that also describes, in part, the events around the Stade de France at the weekend. So when you hear, even as the game had only just started, or before it had started, in fact, the Interior Minister, who you'll hear more of later this programme, the French Interior Minister was putting out pictures of himself in the security area with the chief of security of the police at the stadium, blaming fans, calling fans violent. Liverpool fans now, not Spanish fans. Liverpool fans violent, blaming them for the events. The next day you hear ticketless fans, you hear late fans. It was like Groundhog Day. If you had any part to play in Hillsborough, however remote, it was like Groundhog Day. I even joked on Twitter yesterday evening when the French Interior Minister put that tweet up. I even joked that the video he was looking at of the crowd control imagery, the various camera points around the ground, that would go missing in a few weeks' time when it was needed to prove what had happened and to prove the standard of policing, because that's what happened at Hillsborough. Key pieces of video evidence. Never forget, Hillsborough happened on live television. I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say this. Hillsborough happened on live television. Well, so did Saturday. And this time, there's social media. In 1989, on the day Hillsborough happened, fans came straight to the radio station I worked in at the time, Radio Merseyside. They went straight to Radio City, straight to the Liverpool Echo. And they did that because they didn't have a voice. And the lie was already circulating. Well, this time, it's different. And we'll see how different. I have always said, might be right, might be wrong, don't know. But I've always said that if Twitter had existed in April 1989, that 30-year injustice could not have happened. Not just would not have happened, but could not have happened. So already we have, it's not quite there yet, but already we have statements there from the French government and the French police talking about wanting to know what happened, talking about, and I'll put more flesh on this a bit later in the programme, talking about an industrial scale ticket fraud having happened, not by the fans. There's no suggestion the fans arranged their own ticket fraud. So we'll see what emerges from that claim. The claim that 70% of the tickets at those gates were fraudulent. We'll see. My next guess is that some kind of Russian hack will be blamed, because let's not forget it was meant to take place in St. Petersburg, not in Paris. So we'll see whether that's thrown into the mix in a few days. It has so many echoes of Hillsborough. I can't begin to tell you. If you know anything about Hillsborough, you know that. But this time in France, instead of opening a gate and sending unwitting fans into a death trap called the Leppings Lane End, French riot police tear-gassed, pepper-sprayed men, women, children. People have been giving their accounts. There's video footage of it happening. Liverpool fans, not Real fans. And as thousands of eyewitness accounts have told us as well, they created a dangerous human press of bodies kettled into cage spaces with nowhere to go. One BBC journalist, Nick Parrott, who was there just as a fan, has said 2 hours before, he had a fairly good vantage point because his hotel was near the stadium. 2 hours before kickoff, he could hear and see, because he filmed it, that there was trouble brewing around how it was being policed. That was his assessment. One tweet to me this morning reflected on how the collective memory of Hillsborough probably, and I really believe this is true, probably saved lives on Saturday. This is his tweet. He says, "I was there. It absolutely 100% did. It was an instinct in that underpass where people protected other people, particularly kids, and were very conscious of not pushing and surging, painfully aware of the perilous situation that we were in." Another tweet to me said, "My son was so well looked after by other fans. I cannot thank them enough. I felt more protected by them than the authorities." Remember Hillsborough, no ambulances. Only one ambulance ever came to the pitch. Who carried the injured and the dead? Fans with hoardings, not the authorities. And like I've said, if Twitter had existed, there's no way that cover-up would have happened. Well, Twitter does exist now, so let's see what we can manage this time around. The response to this immediately from the authorities was straight out of the South Yorkshire Police playbook. No doubt there's a headline in a trashy French paper brewing. Headline, La Vérité. Let's see whether they have a French version of Kelvin Mackenzie there. If you were there, I'm keen to hear from you, very keen to hear from you. 0345 606 0973, the number. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. And by the way, this isn't just about Liverpool fans. This isn't just about echoes of Hillsborough. This is also about Wembley in the Euros, recently the finals in Wembley, and the desperate behaviour and the desperate closeness to death and injury that people came to in that as well, and how that was policed. There are so many lessons to learn around the level of policing. There was too little policing, was the conclusion by Dame Louise Casey. Too light touch policing to start with at Wembley. The design of the ground was criticised as well when it comes to huge crowds and big games. But there was clearly heavy-handed and too much policing at the Stade de France, I would say, my view, and I think there are probably historic reasons for that as well. The heavy militarisation of French authorities since the dreadful terrorist attacks in Paris, including at the Stade de France back in 2015. France was on a military footing for years after that, but maybe it still is. Maybe that's part of this. But there must be a proper investigation into what went on. Your calls, your thoughts, particularly your eyewitness accounts if you were there. 0345 6060 973.